Welcome to Never Been Cool. Each episode selects one cool design or media technology trend that is popularly tied to the digital era and traces that trend back in time as far as we can go. I am your host, Dr. Alex Bevan, lecturer at the School of Design at Massey University, Wellington, New Zealand. Today we are joined by great guests. We're joined by Birgit Bachler, who is completing her PhD at Victoria University School of Design. Birgit, what research do you dig?
So I'm both an artist and a programmer, and my current research is about the Internet of Things and how we can build an Internet of Things together with water.
Oh, that's so cool. Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah, you're amazing. You're a badass female coder. Sorry.
Yeah, I was really hoping you were going to get that. Birgit loves it.
I love it.
And also joined by Justin Rotolo, who is a lecturer at the Creative Media Production School at College of Creative Arts at Massey University in Wellington, New Zealand. Justin, what do you teach and what do you do there?
I teach animation, visual effects, post-production, and I'm kind of researching like emerging technologies in fine art.
Awesome. And you have a really big background in special effects.
Yeah, animation, visual effects, yeah. Been in that industry for about 15, 16, 17 years. Yeah. Big old Hollywood blockbuster films.
Yeah.
Some are good, some are bad.
That's awesome. And I have my co-host today is Kate Reddington from the Center for Teaching and Learning at Massey University. Kate is involved in all sorts of things across the college that have to do with teaching and learning, and she's also just an awesome person in general. And at the moment, you're interested in making kind of learning objects, correct? And sort of media that kind of enables learning, particularly for disabilities and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Anything?
Yeah, that's definitely my area of interest.
We're talking about virtual reality, and we have a host of different people here from different sort of touch on that area in different ways. And the aspirations of virtual reality are quite old. E.M. Forster is kind of credited with the first short piece of fiction on virtual reality, written in 1909, which describes a subterranean society where people experience everything virtually from individual pods. It's pretty VR.
Yeah.
1909.
Quite ahead of his time.
And we're also going to be talking about some of the stuff that Birgit, Justin, and I kind of looked at the Future Realities Conference in May of this year, of 2017 in Wellington, that was put together by Projector, I believe, right? Which is a virtual reality company in Wellington. But let's start with definitions. So at that conference, if you'll remember, Andrew Tokley of 8i said that there was a spectrum of reality, of mediated reality, with virtual reality on one end, and then reality on the other, right? Like reality, like walking through the world without any kind of technology. And virtual reality in that spectrum would be like the holodeck experience on Star Trek. Like you're in a chair or you're in a room and you're kind of walking around, running around this completely fake world inside your head. And then he described mixed reality or augmented reality, or two terms also being used right now, as being like technology like the iPhone having sensors on them that detect your environment for you so that they can insert like cartoon figures on the table in front of us who talk to you. So that's not quite virtual reality because it still has some kind of basis in the real world, but it's using a technology to kind of augment the reality that you have around you. So some form of technology has to be involved in these experiences. You can't just be like, well, I'm going to sit in my armchair and think about, it's not like reminiscing or meditating. There has to be some sort of, even if it's a painting, that's a kind of a media technology, arguably. So do you guys have any, do you have a recent kind of heightened experience of augmented reality that you thought was interesting or mind-blowing?
Not really. Yeah.
But you work with all of these
Yeah.
super cool technologies.
Yeah. Well,
You've got virtual reality stuff in your home.
Yeah, I do. And it's still like you said. It's not quite the holodeck, and we're not there, and we're not going to be there for, an unknown period of time. That kind of immersive and believable experiences may not even happen in our lifetimes, but augmented reality, I think, will certainly be an accessible entry point for many people. It'll be forced on us, I think, through relatively affordable devices like a new iPhone, for example. So
I think it's really mundane having a cartoon character on the table talking to you.
Yeah.
I'm very critical of that technology in general because I haven't seen any project where I'm like, that's really makes a lot of sense. Like I'm more coming from the arts background, so I've seen lots of people try and make art, which is fair enough. But I'm just missing it's more like a gimmick for me until now. And if I see people trying to use it, they fall for all the possible traps with that headset kind of thing and forget about all the other things, like the reality that you described. Like suddenly it's only about this headset, like sound design, nothing, tangible design, little. So yeah, I'm waiting for my heightened experience. I hope you can provide me one.
I'll try.
Well, I was just gonna say, you said until now, Birgit, is there like something that's come out recently that you've thought has been more interesting than just a gimmick?
I mean, at the conference, I haven't done so many VR experiences myself, but some speaker mentioned this experience where you're a tree and where you're like stationary and you can't move at all, which I find is a very good solution because moving around in VR is kind of the most problematic feature because people have to use their hands awkwardly or some kind of controller, but they cannot see it, so the controller has to be kind of transferred into the reality. And as far as I understood, that piece was really about you're a tree, you're in a forest, all you can do is look around and the forest evolves around you. And just when the person said that, I was like, okay, that sounds like something that kind of takes all the drawbacks or like the limitations of the technology into account and makes something that's really different, because I would really love to be a tree.
I would too. Although I would want to smell like a tree as well. That's like
There we go.
Vision, it's so vision-based, and like it privileges. I'm getting ahead of myself, but like, yeah, I totally agree with you that it's like there's this really the technology is kind of infatuated with itself right now,
yeah,
and isn't
exactly,
really
yeah.
thinking conceptually through how could we use this in powerful ways. One thing that did come from the conference I thought was interesting. Was a couple of people talking about the applications in medical and training venues. So Kilakovic and Nils were talking about immersive training experience in using VR in the medical field, where it was kind of recreating these crisis moments, like someone is in cardiac arrest. And you have a bunch of things going on around you, like nurses coming in, people putting in wires and plugs, and the patient's like, and another doctor's coming through. And you have these moments, these kind of fork in the road moments of choice in that recreation experience where you can kind of push, this or this, and it kills the patient or it saves the patient's life. So that you don't have to kind of learn that on the ground in a crisis moment, or you can kind of better cope with crisis moments. Although it did, when they showed it, it did just look like, I'm like watching a one-cam TV show with people talking at me, and then it pauses and gives me two options.
Yeah, it's really, and that, I feel like that application wasn't really anything new in the sense that, the action is taking place, where the action is taking place, so you're looking, right? So I guess what's kind of, for those who work in these environments, like you said about, like, people who are building planes or boats or whatever, or these hazards that are really sort of all around them. You know, the whole 360 thing kind of becomes like a little bit more applicable because, you know, there might be the guy in the forklift behind you, and you need to kind of, you know, every once in a while assess, like where are your, you know, colleagues in relation to where you are. But in this case, typically, if I remember correctly, you were kind of in, you know, a controlled environment, right? Patient comes in, you know, all focus is on the patient, right? You know.
I mean, I'm waiting for like the medical VR experience where there's like a body in front of you and you have these like magic VR gloves on and like, there's a fake body. It's like augmented reality. And you have the real tools in front of you and the body's fake and you open the body up and you make all sorts of mistakes and you make spaghetti out of its guts because you're a novice surgeon and you don't know how to do anything. And then you get to make all those mistakes on like, I'm waiting for that kind of experience, but I guess.
So that's kind of more augmented, right?
That's
because
more augmented,
you're using like real elements, like physical elements that you can touch.
And your hands and stuff.
Well, maybe it would be more useful if they put the VR goggles onto the patient so that they wouldn't see the doctors freaking out around them.
They could just they could be a tree.
Yeah. Like
anesthesia.
I see myself at the dentist. I always wonder, why is the ceiling not any interestingly designed, but those,
I know, right?
You know,
it's
like,
always slats.
always the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Why, you know, like a TV would be awesome, but like, you know, a VR thing where you're in this fluffy world, something like that. You know, I mean, that's super.
That's a really
commercial
nice,
thing,
practical
but
application.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like more the relaxation, meditation.
It's totally doable in a dentist chair to give someone a VR goggle set and put some headphones in them. Like, that's doable.
And you're right, like that's such a nice way to address issues that people might have with anxiety around like going to the dentist or having a medical operation.
So I feel like there are two planes here. One is the sort of how technology is progressing, right? And then the other plane is what we're conceptually doing with it and how we're applying it. And it seems like those are both kind of on different trajectories, and they meet at certain occasions in these great moments of like, yes, this is great. And those are the occasions when a technology really makes a difference.
You know, I can imagine something like, you know, feeling in someone else's shoes, like, you know, how is it to be in a wheelchair? Yeah. I mean, it's super simple, but I think that's what VR would be super awesome for, because you could kind of make a wheelchair and stuff. And, you know, for designers, again, who don't have any imagination, to experience how it is to be in someone else's, like, world. I think that's more interesting, but it's maybe more like inside experience rather than, you know, oh, I can jump off a building and, oh, it's going to be all stressful and heightened feelings. I think it's more like this subtle, you know, like the tree.
Yeah. Like rather than going out and exploring the world and doing things to it, it's more inward.
A perception thing.
Yeah.
For sure. The only real experience I had with VR was with a Gear VR with the Samsung phone recently, and the example that I looked at was they'd set it up for some refugees escaping their country, and so you were kind of put in that situation and you were looking around, and this was this environment that someone who lives in New Zealand and is super privileged and doesn't have that experience, like that's a really great perspective and better understanding that we can have of both the world and ourselves. And I feel like that's kind of exactly what you're talking about, Birgit. Like it makes sense to be able to address your inner world and your inner conscious and almost in a more sort of political way than in an outward.
I like how you say privilege, because maybe that's really a good point, you know, by kind of democratizing VR by offering it on phones so that people can really generally use it, but then actually addressing those, you know, differences in realities that are in the reality, again, that 3D world you describe. I think that would be like a nice context for VR.
Or like empathy building.
Yeah.
Like VR as an empathy building tool. And that was something that struck me about the conference is just there was a real lack of discussion about the ethics
right.
and empathy capacity of VR. And that was something I kind of noticed and that stuck with me. So going back to going on this ethics kind of tangent, one experience that struck me was there's this expo area, that we, Birgit's already laughing because we had some funny experiences there. I'm a little bit wacky, and I'm a little bit, everyone was, I know, everyone was kind of very tastefully fumbling around with these various VR sets, and there's nothing funnier than just like a room full of people looking at a few sad sods kind of like patter at the air in front of them while they have these huge kind of horse blinders on. I kind of, I tried two things. I tried one that was like a kind of, was by the Vic School of Design. It was an eco kind of...
it was from engineering, I think.
It was engineering.
Yeah.
It was an eco sort of sensitizing experience where you were standing in the middle of a coral reef and there were various fish fluttering around,
and you named it like slapping the fish.
And you had these you had these wands and
the spear gun with the
spear gun that it wasn't like a sharp thing, it was more like a toilet plunger, and you could shoot it at a fish and it would suck it up and pull it towards you, and then you'd release it. I was like, oh well, that's a nice. All right, that's an interaction with your environment. And then you could also reach out and slap the fish. Most people were kind of like corralling the fish or stroking the fish. I was
why are you
slapping.
slapping the fish? Like, why is it?
I was slapping.
I think you were watching the previous user just like fumbling their hands really like erratically in the air, and you thought that was...
I thought that was what was happening.
Yeah, until someone explained there's a spear gun as well.
Yeah. So I drew a big crowd because I I stood there and I like slapped the fish and I kept saying, slap at the fish, slap at the fish. And it was interesting. But I think what you said, Kate, like what I think this gets to something about VR, like what are we doing here? And why are we slapping fish?
Seriously though, why are you slapping the fish?
Well, they were trying to...
Well, I think it's just like synesthesia, is that the term?
Yeah,
like where you
yeah.
when you become immersed in virtual underwater. You might start to maybe recall the sensation of physically being underwater, and that's what I think VR is often looking to tap into. I feel like this is why kind of a lot of the experiences are the same. They're quite floaty. On the water, there's quite a few underwater 360 experiences, games, things taking place out in space.
And the other experience I had was, and this was great. There was something called Shopper 360, and it was this really blood-sucking marketing firm that was trying to kind of anticipate which brands would do the best on their kind of in competition with other brands by recreating a store aisle. And you'd put on your VR set, and you'd have two wands, and you could sort of navigate the aisles and open up a freezer and then pick a box of something with the wand and put it in your shopping cart. So I was trying to recreate a shopping cart experience to anticipate which packaging appeals to people over their familiar brands. And the suit that was kind of, introduced me to this, like gave me these wands and the VR set and left me to it. And I tried to kind of be a resistant shopper, and I tried to kind of like throw the food and not put it in the shopping cart. And I was all narrating, I'm like, I'm gonna throw this pack of ice cream, Mr. Man. And I chuck it, and it would just kind of come back and put itself in my shopping cart. I was like, no, screw that. And so I'd throw another thing. And the suit, Birgit took a picture of this. The suit dude was just looking at his phone the entire time. I was kind of like, whoa, he was just kind of like texting someone because he already wrote me off as like not
Oh my
an
gosh,
ideal
my,
shopper.
My jaw just dropped, like, at shock of, like, how his rudeness.
Well, in all fairness, I was not playing the game he wanted me to play, right? I was being an unwieldy academic. But it made me think that VR, in these VR experiences, it's anticipating and constructing a preconceived notion of our interactions with the world. You're either playing by the rules it's setting up, or you're not. And if you're not, you don't play. The game does not incorporate you. So to what extent, people talk about the boundary kind of testing of VR, but to what extent are we just kind of feeding back our own kind of ideas of reality to ourselves?
It's kind of on that tangent, did anyone see that experiment? There was this video of two people dating in a VR world. Like it was a date, and they were wearing VR headsets, and then it would switch, and they'd be like monsters, and they'd have like weird limbs, and they'd try and touch each other, and then it would switch, and they'd be at a restaurant, and they'd like do other shit. But the technology hadn't quite caught up, and so they're like heads around backwards, and like they were just like super gammy, and you could see like one screen of what they were looking and one screen of what they looked like, and it was pretty comical. I think they had a good time.
What if you can only what if you date someone but you only have chemistry as slime monsters?
It's a
Like,
real
do you-
possibility, and I think this is the sort of thing that we need to consider ethically when we're moving
But
into
that's
this
cool,
kind of VR
though.
world. I think
That's
you should
really
check it out.
neat.
It's pretty comical.
That's an inventive use of VR.
That thing at that consumer, what they were looking to do was to kind of really closely monitor and measure consumer interest in products, and it wasn't a good use of the technology, and I still fail to see how we can't get the same information from just simply recording consumers in a mock store. But just completely going off that topic for 1 second, but along the lines of the potential of technology, I kind of meant to say before, when I went to New York recently at the Whitney Biennial, there was an artist who, his name is Jordan Wolfson, who had a VR piece there. We talk about sort of VR being this sort of empathy vehicle, I think this was the case in this VR piece where he was sort of pummeling this animatronic puppet in a sort of 360 immersive video environment, and he was just beating it down, and there was CG blood everywhere, and you couldn't really see anybody's face in particular here, but of course you felt for the victim, right, who was getting pummeled. And another thing that always comes up with VR is the sense of agency, whether you can do something, right, about what you're seeing, or are you actually a player in this world? Can you interact with it in the sort of 6 degrees of freedom that you have? So in this case, you're just powerless to do anything about this pummeling, ineffective and sort of moving use of the technology. For me was that in the fine art context too. But having had agency in, I guess, choosing products off of a shelf, it was still nowhere near of a fulfilling experience, I'm sure.
How is it different for you than watching a Tarantino flick or something that's really gory?
You're right, and that's a really good, point. I don't really, other than it sort of feeling a little bit more immersive in the sense that I could sort of look around and observe the rest of the environment. I guess you have some agency in that you could look away from the violence, but
you could do that in a movie too.
Sure.
How many people were in the experience at the same time?
About 12.
That would for me, that would be part of it as well.
Yeah.
Right.
But you're not experiencing it collectively.
No.
You're experiencing it individually.
But you
So
know
you
that
can't see
someone's
them in the space,
yeah.
No.
But you know they're there.
Yeah, you know
Yeah.
they're there. Yeah.
And there's various kind of interpretations of where VR or augmented reality kind of originate. One idea is that it originates with Renaissance perspectival painting, which really strove to recreate perspective, vision, and depth by using one vanishing point, and then straight lines would be drawn from one vanishing point in the distance outward towards the edges of the campus, and then every object in space would be organized according to these sort of lines, and you'd create this idea of the sensation of perspectival space. I looked at the stuff written on VR, and I thought to myself, this is all it is privileging Western art, right? Like it's all centering the nascence of VR in sort of Western painting and literature. So I started thinking about other non-Western examples that might kind of tap into the same experience. So then I started looking into Chinese vertical landscape paintings, particularly of the Song Dynasty, which was between the 1020 and the 1200s. Particularly the work of Guo Xi, who is a very prominent landscape artist, and Guo Xi is a good example because he also wrote a treatise on Chinese landscape painting, and how the painter is supposed to invite the viewer to kind of receive it. So I read some scholarly work about this person's treatise, and I'm going to show you an example of Guo Xi painting called Early Spring. It's very famous. It's a vertical landscape painting. What you're meant to do is the Chinese painters organized space not in terms of vanishing point, but in terms of three planes. The bottom third, the middle third of the vertical painting, and the top third. And the bottom third was supposed to be closest to you. So perspective was created, the illusion of perspective was created by having things in the foreground be very big, and things in the background, the top third, being very far away and kind of fuzzy. So it's not the same as a vanishing point, because a vanishing point chooses a point. This is kind of dividing the canvas differently in terms of three lateral slats. What Guo Xi tried to do is, he said the viewer is invited to enter the painting from the bottom corner, either bottom corner, through sometimes like an anchor point, like a house or an ox cart or something like that. And then you're supposed to wind your way upwards through the painting into the distance. And the painting is encouraging the person to close the distance with the physical painting and then back away. Like, so you're physically moving in space. You're meant to physically kind of go closer and then farther away as you kind of experience various depths of this painting. And these Chinese landscape paintings are later the kind of foundation point for later Japanese rock gardens. And these influence and shape the kind of aesthetic that Japanese rock gardens, and how you're supposed to kind of sit in your house and look at your rock garden and imagine that these little rocks are big mountains and the lines in the sand are clouds and water, and you're supposed to mentally walk through the garden as a little person in this landscape. And I was like, oh, that there's some harmony there. And I don't know if this is a stretch, but it seems this drive to invite people in to a work of art, to invite them in and to also invite them to reflect on the medium they're experiencing itself in the act. Is a painting medium-wise that much different from a VR set? And what are the differences here? This drive has existed for arguably thousands of years. How can we distinguish where we are now?
I mean, I don't want to subvert the whole idea about reality and art and images, but I mean, with VR, I would be wondering where is this virtual reality actually happening in our brains, right? So I've seen some artworks that I saw at a Sonic X festival in Amsterdam by Ivana Franke, and her work was like LEDs that would blink in such a frequency that when you closed your eyes, it would directly make patterns on your visual cortex.
Ooh.
So you wouldn't see it with your eyes, just
You
your
see
brain.
it with your brain.
You see your brain make these images. And I would think, like, same with any kind of visual stimuli that are bombarded on your cortex or wherever, people see. I think, like, when you're dreaming is awesome virtual reality for me as well. So, like, I don't think it's really an invention in that sense. Maybe it's just like, the 6 degrees stuff. I don't really see it as a big, I would say a painting can be much more immersive than certain VR experiences.
Shopper 360.
For example, yeah. I mean, I think it's really like in the eye of the beholder as well. And that's why I also think it's important what kind of viewer designers have in mind when they design VR experiences. Because coming to that kind of issue with, like, it's mostly kind of one sort of developers developing these experiences, and they only take one kind of their own, like, privileged, white, male, whatever, dominated perspectives into account, that there's only one way of viewing a thing. So I think if you would make a painting and show it to one person with this background and to another person with that background, like, their virtual reality is a completely different experience, right? I mean, maybe I'm stretching it too much, but I think, like, yeah. Brain is totally capable of looking at a 2D image and understanding the 3-dimensional part of it. Yeah. So, yeah, what is the virtual thing, like, is it you standing in the room full of people watching you with goggles on? You cannot see them. They can see you. I mean, that's quite a virtual experience for the bystander. I feel it's like...
What do you mean? Like, the virtual experience is really in the bystander looking at this, like, poor
person
person
flailing? Also
flailing?
be, like, for me, I felt really removed from reality watching you doing that stuff and seeing all these other people around. I think it's very absurd kind of setup. I mean...
It is. It is absurd. It's all absurd, right? Like, but then if we push this definition to its very, very edges, and it is what you say, that really it's the brain's capacity to kind of read images in space in itself, then we're all experiencing VR right now, right?
Yep,
like,
exactly.
So I guess really, VR is looking to, deliver a textbook immersive experience.
Yeah. Without really maybe... I think the people who are paying attention to the emotional immersion and how it's connected to the visual art are fine artists, are maybe exploring the kind of definition of VR and augmented reality in ways that maybe the industry is not conceiving it so well.
Some of my favorite and sort of oddest VR experiences have been one of my favorite artists is Hieronymus Bosch. He painted these really big paintings with all these things happening in one corner and the other corner, and somebody's getting, whatever, horn stuck up his rear end, whatever it is, right?
And, they're pretty bodied. Yeah. I love Bosch, too.
One of my favorite experiences is this, like, VR Bosch experience where you sort of, like, someone's gone in and they've sort of cut out parts of his painting and they've put it in this really odd 3D environment, and you're kind of on this, like, roller coaster ride, slow moving roller coaster ride through a kind of reconstructed Bosch painting.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't do anything about it other than sort of look around, and it's very slow moving, and it's really quite low fidelity and quite boring. But and it's not at all, like, even visually sort of close to what a real Bosch painting is, but it's sort of this Bosch-like experience that is immersive, in a way. I've never been, I guess, surrounded by a Bosch world, in 3 dimensions. Some of these platforms for, like, developing 360 worlds are, like, quite sophisticated. Like, there's Unity and Unreal. There's all kinds of effects that can be done, lighting effects and camera effects. And the recreation of, like, a fairly realistic 3D world is, possibly either here now as it is, or not too far off. So, I think visually I think we can expect more sort of high fidelity VR experiences, but whether that makes, for better VR experiences, still a question.
Let's go on a little bit of a move towards augmented reality. So at the VR conference, there was a dude called Mark Billinghurst, and he was talking about video conferencing with improved content capture, where the AI recognizes facial expressions and like has you have like so Kate, if you were in Manawatu, I could beam you in, and there'd be some sort of mechanism at the other end in Manawatu that's reading your facial expressions, and then there'd be a Kate virtual like thing, hologram interfaced onto my room that I'm seeing with my VR goggles, and then it would read your facial expressions, and then you would, the Kate sort of doppelganger would smile or be angry or whatever. So it's a heightened experience of actually conferencing with people by recreating Kate and Kate being in the room.
Would that be like? So I was just in a video conference.
Yeah.
And it was really hard.
Yeah.
And there felt like there was a lot of distance, which was a shame because I was really interested in what this person had to say, and it was kind of the technology wasn't there. So the way you're describing it, would it be a real-time representation of me? So I would be talking and moving exactly how I was in Manawatu, but here. Cool.
So if you were kind of, on the sly looking up stuff on your phone underneath the table, I would be able to see it.
Right.
Yeah.
You could like look under the table and see my phone and be like...
Yeah, I would. Like that's what this is enabling. So that's more augmented reality. Or possible applications I thought of this were kind of, imagine if, so the idea this guy offered was, imagine that, your computer is not behaving, so you could kind of phone Apple, and Apple will visually cast a little virtual, like, I don't know, parrot or some creature on your desk, be like, hello, Miss Bevan, I'm here to fix your computer for you. Okay, now.
Like Clippy.
Yeah. Like some sort of...
Sorry, the Microsoft Word?
Yeah, like that guy. Yeah. Only it's on your desk. Or if I'm trying to DIY, like rewire my electrical system at home, like a bad idea like that, there'd be like a safety instructor being like, no, don't cross the white wire with the red wire, in space, and showing me what to do. The kind of dystopic applications I saw for this, and this was just when I was in the conference. Imagine you're at work, and you're doing work, and you put up Facebook, and then all of a sudden, your boss pops up on your desk and goes, "What are you doing, Alex? I see you're doing Facebook. What? Remember, it's 7.5 hours a day. What are you doing?" Or imagine you're kind of doing press-ups at the gym, and you're kind of like, "Oh, fuck." And then a little trainer pops up next to you and goes, "Hey, Alex, don't you want to lose that last kg? You can do it. You can do it." And those were my ideas of augmented reality. Do you think that, I don't know, what were your takeaways from that presentation? The Microsoft dude about VR conferencing and applications of augmented reality.
I liked what Mark is like a researcher in like telepresence, which I think is also what you're talking about. Like he seems to be doing this stuff like a really long time ago, back in like 2001 or something, and it seemed to be like we're still not even there yet. He seemed to be really that kind of far ahead of his time, and I think that he had these sort of like visions for. Yeah, like people, talk about empathy again, like people literally seeing things from your perspective, which was one of the things that he showcased, was this like these goggles that allowed somebody else to see things from another person's perspective, literally. So in the case of like DIY and dictating instructions, it seemed like a very good use, right? Mm-hmm. So I think he had this kind of like Lego helpline, if I remember correctly, right? So it's like, well, how do I build this Lego kit? and you could talk to a Lego technician who would actually, see the blocks in front of you and say, well, you're going to want to grab that block. No, not that one, that one.
That one, yeah.
I mean, it kind of resonates with me a little bit, the whole telepresence thing. I had to spend some time away from my kids for about a year and a half, and like the number of times that like I just found that Facebook wasn't quite, FaceTime wasn't quite adequate to, bring me closer to them. It was pretty much every day. Like I actually wanted really to be as much as I could, in the same physical space.
Yeah.
And so in like the most ideal scenario, what Marcus seemed to be talking about was moving towards this sort of three-dimensional, representation of somebody else in a real space.
So you could watch a movie with your kids virtually.
Yeah.
And look across and have them be on the couch with you. Yeah.
Or I could be, placed in the center of the room and just sort of, the number of times they walk off screen where the iPad has fallen off the couch where it was once perched and now it's like face down on the carpet, perhaps being, like someday having this 360 camera strategically placed that allows me to sort of, see their environment. But I guess for them, like what he was talking about was this concept of like the telepresence where like an image of you, a representation of you is actually projected into their space. We're now more mobile than ever, and it'd be great, to move a little bit closer towards feeling like you're with somebody who's on the other side of the world.
I think it's really interesting how you talk about the distant part, because I think in that talk it was more really like liveness, like I'm on one part of the planet and someone is somewhere else, and that kind of provides this feeling of closeness and connection and emotionally. And while you were talking, I was just thinking like, well, is there any concern for like also stretching the time scale of that? Would you be wanting to sit with your kids on the couch in 20 years or so, and re-experiencing that, or, talking to your past self, like having
Jesus,
some
Birgit,
kind of...
that's creepy.
Why is that creepy?
That's just creepy.
I mean, I think that's kind of like an application that I see like that should be more explored. I mean, going on an AI and people scanning their bodies and
it's
stuff.
like a therapy tool.
Yeah, but you could see like deceased people that are close to you and kind of get, that gets back to the ethics and everything.
Yeah.
But like
Or
people
someone
are
who's
still talking
died.
about like distant as in a spatial like feature, but you can actually see the distance somewhere else. Like I think I'm kind of a bit, I think that the tool, like using AR as a tool of convenience is maybe something that doesn't strike me. So like I would rather have it being a tool more for inconvenience, like actually transgressing the borders of, what we could do generally. It's not weird for me seeing you here. And probably I'm really used to the fact if I was in Austria and then I would be projected in this room, it still kind of makes sense, but why couldn't we have this meeting then, somewhere in Syria, and experience something else, like from an or seeing like something from the past or imagining something in the future, but like projecting ourselves into like different time scales. I would find that really more intriguing. Again, addressing this kind of change of perspective and stuff.
And ethics. Like, I think that's a big thing that was just left so absent in the at the conference. And I feel like that's the central thing. Yeah. That is.
I mean, that's
here.
what I didn't like was this singular perspective. There was this one company with the oil platforms.
Oh, that was IBM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just seeing there, that this kind of Watson.
Yes.
Had just the agenda of whatever the company wanted was probably just pumping resources out of the planet.
To catch Kate up, so the Watson was... No, because I was going to get to this anyway. This was the most both disturbing and amazing exhibit for me, was that IBM has these amazingly brilliant, young, plucky people who designed this AI program called Watson. And they've applied it to things like mole map, which is you take a picture of a mole with your phone, and then the AI kind of cross-references it with all sorts of moles, and it goes, "Yup, that looks like cancer. You should probably see a doctor." Or it says, "Nope, you're just fucking ugly and moly." The other application of this is like an AI personal shopper who's with you and goes, "No, that doesn't look good on you." Like, or I could just take my mom. Or the disturbing one was putting it on an oil rig and using Watson to archive the quote-unquote wealth of kind of industry experience all the miners have. So creating a data mine that is like an accrual of all of the knowledge that people who are close to retirement have in terms of digging for oil. And, you know, yeah,
I was for like future training? Or,
yes.
Right.
And
sorry.
future digging.
Future redundancy of humans in that.
Yes, that too.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Future redundancy of humans
right.
working on that platform, I suppose.
Right. I feel like that was
your brain,
the key part that I was
not
missing.
valuable
Thank
to
you.
us. We got Watson.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And we had I could go into the whole close histories between military and VR. They seem closely connected. AI, VR, and military.
Yeah, the whole internet is like
the whole internet was a
everything.
military project.
Yeah.
Panoramic paintings were used for military purposes.
And those drone drivers.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Like, so you could...
that go to work down the road in the States and
right.
Virtually
and kill brown people.
Afghanistan and yeah.
See, it's all about empathy. I mean, because we keep coming from your experience of wanting to kind of be with your children when we're living at a distance is a kind of experience of a use of augmented reality to feel closer. It's also used to gain distance when people have to do something unpleasant, like a drone pilot. It seems to me that ethics and sort of empathy are at the core of mixed reality, but they are not really being talked through in a substantial way, apart from kind of fine art and, exhibits at the Whitney. The most jaw-dropping demo at the conference, and I might be kind of, I don't know, this is my experience, was when the IBM people, same people who had Watson, had an audience member come on stage. It was a young 20-year-old dude, and they put electrodes on his head. They had like a little headset, which is electrodes, reads brain signals, and they placed a robot in front of him. And then they said, now think of something that's very vivid, like ice cream. Works for most people. So I'm going to say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you have to think about eating ice cream. And he did that, and they pressed record. So the headset read his brain signals. And then they said, okay, give us a moment. And they mapped that onto a command, onto the program the robot to kind of go forward. And they said, okay, everything's connected. Now think of eating ice cream. And he did, and the robot went across the table.
Whoa.
So it's this, it was this Jedi kind of, and the guy described it as Jedi power, like moving things with your mind, using these tools. And the kind of dystopic and utopic uses of that go just really far. What do you guys think? Was that as jaw-dropping for you as it was for me, or is that kind of old hat for you guys?
For
VR
me,
veterans?
it's old hat because we had this thing years ago. And I mean, it's quite a simple tool, right?
Yeah.
Because it just like maps data patterns from your brain into another output. So you
you could also be like wringing your hands.
And they were kind of presenting it like a magical trick, like also using the Jedi thing in Star Wars. So I was really like...
Whatever. Old news.
Wellington seems to have, issues in catching up with...
The shade that's been thrown. Holy moly.
So,
It was a good performance. Sorry.
What
No,
have we,
it
what
was
have we but what have we done with this technology? So this is old.
Well, so people are using these for prosthetic limbs, right?
yeah.
Like that, I feel like that's a thing. That's
But also, like,
but I've never experienced it, and I've never
therapy
seen
and
it, so
stuff,
I'm
yeah.
the same as you. Like, that still like boggles my mind. And you're like, yeah, of course, this machine's just reading the data from your brain. It's like, what? So I don't know. I feel like there's, this
There's
is
a disconnect in like people in the industry, and then
right, which is why
people like us.
which is
We're
why
kinda
we're
like,
here. It's the lay people.
It's a touch screen.
No, but I think it's a really good point because the way he presented it was like it's not simple technology, don't get me wrong. It's really like electrodes.
No, but I
and-
can understand the steps
Yeah,
they took.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
in the way, that's exactly how VR is being sold as well, like this magic trick and leaving your soul somewhere else and, transcending to other heights. So I think maybe once we get beyond that, wow, someone moved a robot with their brain, which is not really what happened, it's like...
Yeah, that's true.
Like there were all these signal processings going on, but he did nothing with his brain other than,
move a robot.
Yeah.
It's not like he performed surgery with his brain.
I mean, that would be possible, that like this kind of thing. I think as far as it goes, it's just for really simple things.
I guess we talked about a lot of other technologies, sort of periphery technologies that are kind of developing in parallel with virtual reality, right? I guess virtual reality is sort of is a vehicle for possibly experiencing, the outputs from some of these other technologies. Like one of the things at this conference that was, again, kind of really left a mark on me was, I guess it's like the Wrestler or 8i was doing this thing where this time capsule project where they've got either an array of cameras or some depth sensing cameras placed in a scene, and they had this mother sort of nursing a child. And the thinking is that we can record all this information and stitch it together, reconstruct it in a 3D space, and then deliver it to that child 18 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that child can experience the sort of tenderness of that moment in its sort of, in a quote, immersive way, right? So
I wouldn't want to see myself sucking at my mom's boob. Like,
seconded.
They sort of phrase it in a way that it's sort of a time capsule's gift. It's like, wouldn't it be a lovely gift to give to this person? I don't know. I guess I kind of fell for it a little bit. Like for me as a parent, I guess. I used to think it was a really great idea to like scan my kids like once a year and get little figures printed of them. Like in my mind, I thought it'd be really cool, but it's kind of funny. It's like since
3D scanning.
3D scanning, yeah. And now like I've kind of talked to more people about it, and maybe like the reality of these technologies are on everybody's minds. Everyone's more aware of these technologies now, but now it seems like people are like, man, that's weird. Why would you want to do that?
I understand
isn't
why.
Isn't that creepy? Like
It's a little creepy, but
is,
all
yeah.
I never thought of it.
all emotions are kind of creepy,
Well, this is true.
right?
But it's kind of like it's a photo or video, right? But in a different form.
Yeah.
Like it's a sculpture as opposed to a photograph. I think it's pretty cute.
People talked about this sort of like, well, you're literally making objects out of them, and isn't that sort of strange?
Well,
You
like,
know,
I mean, you have
I
like
never thought
models
of
of celebrities and shit. Like the Hulk comes in a little. You can make little boxes. I
It's
think
like
it's
a photo. I mean,
adorable. Yeah, it's
people
like a
accuse-
collectible.
It's like photographs. Like people had the same knee-jerk response when people started making photos of the world, right?
And people said, isn't it lovely? You can take them and, tuck them away, in a box. And
But you
put
do
them
that
in a
with photos too,
diorama.
right?
So to wrap up, is going around the room and just sharing what surprised you the most in today's discussion.
I guess what surprises me is to talk about not cool is that, we've said kind of at several times throughout this conversation that a lot of this stuff is actually not cool. Like really, right? Like stuff that we've experienced, or we've stated in one way or another that we're actually not interested in some of this stuff, And there are people, of course, who are, at this point dedicating their entire lives to moving this stuff forward. And in isolated elements, I guess like the technology is really quite impressive. There's so much engineering that's going into the various aspects that make a VR experience. and some of it is really cool, but it's quite possible that it culminates into experiences that are not cool, things that are just underwhelming, things that you're sickening, right? What else have we said? Not fulfilling, like, I think there was an article, and I'll say this quickly, but there was an article, I think, in a School of Visual Arts, has like an art critic aspect of the school. I think accompanying that Wolfson exhibition at the Whitney, I think it was these films of these fishermen in Brazil who catch fish with their bare hands, I think, and then they hold on to them. And there's footage of them suffocating the fish, essentially, or you watch the fish expire. And the questions were, do we have to see in such gratuitous detail, the pummeling of a puppet to feel for it, or can we just sort of use more traditional means to sort of, in animals, to sort of feel that same sort of level of empathy? So I guess, it surprises me, but it also doesn't surprise me that, we have our own tastes and our own opinions on what, are really kind of technically impressive feats to create these kind of experiences.
And then to what extent they affect us emotionally is different for everyone. And sometimes it doesn't demand the most high-tech experience. Kate.
Like it could be a rock garden. I really want a rock garden. And I want to imagine being a tiny little pixie in amongst the giant rock mountains. That was just the most relaxing explanation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's my new life goal. So I think kind of conceptually the most mind-boggling but exciting idea was, Birgit, when you were talking about why can't we talk to people through time as opposed to just space? Like, why can't we, have someone come in from somewhere else or be in a space that we were in 10 years ago? Whatever age you are, you've already lived so many different lifetimes within this one life, and so many different places and feelings and things that are associated with that photographs might sort of spark a memory, but there are so many things that we don't actually remember, and having the ability to be able to experience that in surround sound and see these people that we haven't seen for so many years and these places that we haven't been in for such a long time, and we've probably made them different in our heads. I feel like that conceptually was the most delightful, I guess, the most interesting thing. And I agree what you were saying about the fact that there's all this technology and all this hype and a lot of uninspiring projects to engage in, which, that's such a rude thing to say. I couldn't do any of the stuff that these guys are creating, and it is exciting. It is all part of that journey forward. But I still just want a rock garden. That's in summary.
Yeah. No,
and to travel through time.
These are somewhat doable goals.
I did not think that we were going to get to that by the end of this 2 hours, that a feasible life goal is for me to be able to time travel. This is a momentous occasion. Thank you.
I would start with the rock garden.
The immediate future.
Birgit, what did you find surprising, if at all, if anything at all?
I think you made a really valid point, Justin, in it's so easy to sit here. I might come across like the most pretentious person ever, And I could probably do some of that stuff, but people are really developing awesome things with it. And then the question would really be, why is everyone kind of always so disappointed? I think that I have experienced that developers are more excited about their own product. And again, maybe it comes back to this one-person experience. So maybe is it really possible that I can say I would be able to create a virtual world that would excite you as much as me or you know, because we have totally different realities that we enjoy. So I guess, yeah. I mean, I was surprised by that. I would have expected people being more like, oh, and that was this really awesome thing, you know, talking more about like, oh, the great things or like exciting ones. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's us humans being a bit overly cautious, seeing like a technology move faster than our own imagination.
Ooh.